He collapsed at her feet, with blood soaking through his shirt. So why did she spend her last coins to feed him instead of walking away? The plate slipped from Clara's hand as the man's body hit the floorboards with a dull, heavy thud. Someone laughed behind her. A chair scraped, boots dragged slow across the wood. He tried to push himself up, but his arm shook, leaving a faint smear of dust and red across the floor. Clara knelt without thinking, catching the heat of his skin through torn cloth as the room went quiet in a way it hadn't all day. Outside, the wind rattled the door once, sharp and sudden, and no one moved to help except her. What she didn't know yet, what no one in that room could see, was who he really was. Stay with me. You're going to want to hear how this ends. By noon, the heat had settled over Dry Creek like a heavy hand that wouldn't lift. It pressed down on the rooftops, sank into the dust road, and curled through the open door of Gus Turner's saloon, bringing with it the smell of sunburnt wood and old leather. Inside, the air didn't move much. Clara Bennett stood behind the counter, wiping down a row of cloudy glasses with a cloth that had long since given up trying to be clean. Sweat clung lightly to the back of her neck, but she didn't reach for it. She rarely did. After 3 years in this place, she had learned which discomforts were worth noticing and which ones weren't. A couple of men sat at the far table, cards in their hands, boots stretched out, talking low. Another leaned against the wall, hat tipped down, nursing a cup of coffee gone cold. No one looked up unless something unusual happened, and in Dry Creek, nothing unusual happened anymore. Gus stood near the barrels, counting coins with slow, deliberate movements, like each one owed him something. He didn't look at Clara, but he didn't need to. She knew the rhythm of the room well enough to keep it steady. The door creaked open. It wasn't loud, just a dry, dragging sound, but it cut through the room enough that heads lifted one by one. The man in the doorway didn't step in right away. He stood there a second, shoulders heavy, one hand braced against the frame like it was the only thing holding him upright. Then he moved. One step, then another. His coat was torn at the sleeve. Dust ground into the fabric until it was hard to tell what color it had once been. His boots were worn thin, edges split. One side of his face was darkened with bruising, not fresh, not clean, the kind that came from more than just a fall. He made it halfway to the counter before his balance wavered. A low chuckle rose from the card table. "Well now," one of the men said, leaning back in his chair. "Looks like the desert's spitting folks back out." Another snorted. "Or he got himself tossed out of wherever he came from." The man didn't answer. He reached the counter and set his hand down. It trembled once, then stilled, fingers pressing into the wood as if he needed to feel something solid. Clara's cloth slowed in her hand. "Anything to eat?" he said. The words came rough, not loud, like they'd been used too much already. "I can pay. Later." Gus didn't look up right away. He finished counting, stacked the coins, then finally raised his head. His eyes moved over the man once, boots to shoulders, paused at the bruised face, then dropped back down. "No money," Gus said flatly. "No food." The room stayed quiet. "Just bread," the man said. "I've been walking." "Don't matter how far you walked." Gus leaned his forearms on the counter. "This ain't a charity house." A few men laughed again. Not loud this time. Just enough. The man's grip on the counter tightened. For a moment, it looked like he might say something more. Then his shoulders lowered a fraction. He nodded once, almost to himself. Clara set the glass down. She hadn't meant to move yet, but her hands had already left the counter. "You're letting him walk out?" she said. Her voice wasn't raised. It didn't need to be. It carried clean across the room. Gus turned his head slowly. "You got something to add, Clara?" She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into the pocket of her apron and pulled out a small, folded piece of cloth. Inside it, a handful of coins. Not many. Enough for a week's meals if you were careful. She set them on the counter. They'll cover it. The room shifted. Not loudly. Not all at once, but something in the air tightened. Gus looked at the coins, then at her. "That's your pay," he said. Clara nodded. "I know." He held her gaze a second longer, like he was waiting for her to take it back. She didn't. Behind her, a chair scraped lightly across the floor. Someone muttered under their breath. No one laughed now. Gus exhaled through his nose, slow, irritated. Then he scooped the coins into his hand. "Fine," he said. "But he eats quick." He turned toward the back, shouting for the cook. Clara stepped around the counter. The man hadn't moved far. He was still there, one hand resting on the edge, like stepping away too fast might send him to the floor. "Sit," she said quietly. He looked at her then. Up close, his eyes were pale. Not the washed-out kind. Clear, but tired, like they had seen too much sun and not enough rest. He didn't argue. He let her guide him to the small table by the window, where a narrow beam of light cut through the dust and landed across the wood. He lowered himself into the chair carefully, as if measuring every inch of the motion. "Thank you," he said. Clara shook her head once. "Just eat when it comes." She turned before he could say anything more. Back behind the counter, she picked up the cloth again. Her hands moved automatically, but her eyes drifted once, just once, back toward the window. He sat still, shoulders easing a little, like being allowed to stay had taken some weight off him. When the plate arrived, he didn't reach for it right away. He looked at it first. Then he picked up the fork and began to eat slowly. Not like a man starved past reason. Like someone making sure the food would last as long as it could. Clara set another glass on the shelf. From the corner of her eye, she caught him glance up. Not at the room, at her. It wasn't the look she expected. Not desperate. Not searching. Just steady, like he was trying to remember something. The heat pressed in through the open door. The men at the table returned to their cards, voices low again. Gus moved back to his barrels, muttering under his breath. And for a brief stretch of time, the saloon felt quieter than it had any right to be. Clara wiped the last glass and set it down. She didn't know his name. She didn't know where he'd come from. But something in the way he sat there, holding himself together with what little he had left, stayed with her longer than it should have. Outside, the dust rolled slow across the road, as if the town itself was holding its breath. And inside, without a word, something had already begun to shift. By late afternoon, the heat had not broken. It had only settled deeper, pressing the town flat and quiet. Clara moved through the last of her tables, stacking plates, rinsing cups in water that had long since turned warm. The man by the window had finished eating. He sat a while after, hands resting on either side of the plate, like he wasn't in a hurry to leave but knew he had to. When he finally stood, the chair scraped lightly against the floor. A few heads turned, but no one spoke. He stepped toward the door, slower than before, though not steady. Clara watched him go without meaning to. He paused at the threshold, one hand on the frame again, the same way he had come in. Then he stepped out into the white glare of the road. The door swung shut behind him. The room filled back in with small sounds. Cards on wood. A low cough. Gus muttering over his ledger. Clara picked up a cup and wiped it dry. She told herself that was the end of it. Evening came without much change. The sky faded from hard blue to a dull, dusty orange, then to a gray that settled over the roofs. Lanterns lit one by one along the street. The air cooled just enough to notice. Clara finished her shift and stepped outside. Dry Creek didn't hold on to people at night. It thinned out. Doors closed early. Voices dropped. What was left was mostly wind and the creak of old wood. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders and started down the road toward the small place she rented behind the old boarding house. Halfway there, she heard it. "Someone's down out there." The voice came from two men standing near the hitching post. They weren't moving toward anything, just looking. "Where?" the other asked. "Near the crates, by the feed store." Clara slowed. She didn't mean to change direction. Her feet did it before she could think better of it. The crates stood in a shadowed stretch of road, stacked uneven against the side of a building that had seen better years. A lantern hung nearby, its light weak, swinging slightly in the evening breeze. He was there, slumped against the lowest crate, one arm hanging loose, head tipped forward. Clara felt something tighten in her chest. She crossed the distance quickly and dropped to one knee beside him. "Hey," she said, low. "Can you hear me?" No answer. Up close, his skin had gone pale under the dust. His shirt was darker at the shoulder, damp in a way that wasn't from sweat. She reached out, hesitated just a second, then touched the fabric. It stuck. Her fingers came away faintly stained. Behind her, one of the men spoke again. "Best leave him. Sheriff'll deal with it come morning." Clara didn't turn. "He won't make it till morning," she said. Silence followed. No one stepped forward. She slid her arm under his, bracing herself as she tried to lift him. He was heavier than he looked, dead weight in places, resisting the motion without meaning to. "Come on," she murmured, more to herself than to him. "Don't make me do all the work." For a moment, nothing happened. Then his head shifted slightly. A breath moved through him, uneven but there. She pulled again. This time he came with it, enough for her to get him halfway upright. His arm draped over her shoulder, his weight settling against her in a way that made her stagger a step. The men behind her watched. They didn't offer help. Clara adjusted her footing, tightened her grip, and started walking. It took longer than it should have. Each step careful, measured, the road uneven under her boots, his breath warm against the side of her neck, shallow but there. The old boarding house stood quiet at the edge of town. Its paint had peeled years ago. One window still held glass. The rest were boarded or left open to the air. Clara pushed the door open with her shoulder. Inside, the space smelled faintly of dust and old wood. A single bed stood against the wall, a small table beside it, a basin in the corner with a chipped rim. She eased him down onto the mattress. He didn't wake. She stood there a moment, catching her breath, hands resting on her hips. Then she moved. She lit the oil lamp first. The flame flickered, then steadied, casting a soft, uneven light across the room. Next, the water. She poured what she had into the basin and dipped a cloth into it. The water turned cooler as it soaked through. When she came back to him, she worked at the edge of his shirt, pulling the fabric away from the darkened spot. It took a little effort. The cloth had stuck where the blood had dried. She peeled it back slowly, careful not to tear anything worse. The wound wasn't clean, not a fall, not something that came from slipping off a horse like he'd said. It ran along the shoulder, shallow in places, deeper in others. The kind of cut that came from something sharp passing too close. Clara sat back on her heels. "Well," she said quietly, "that's not nothing." She cleaned it the best she could. Water first. Then a strip of cloth torn from an old sheet she kept folded in the chest by the wall. Her hands moved steady, even when his body tensed under the touch. At one point, his hand shifted. She glanced down. His fingers had curled around something at his side. A knife, old, worn smooth at the handle. Not decorative, used. Even in his sleep, he held it like he expected to need it. Clara didn't try to take it away. She finished tying the cloth and sat back, resting her hands on her knees. The room had gone quiet again. Outside, the wind moved lightly along the boards, carrying the faint sound of something loose tapping against a wall. She watched him for a long moment. "Who are you?" she said, not expecting an answer. "To walk into a town like this half dead and still hold on like that?" He didn't move, but his breathing had evened out, just a little. Clara leaned back against the wall, letting the lamp burn low. She meant to stay awake, just until she was sure he wasn't going to slip away. But the day had been long. The heat, the work, the weight of carrying him across the road, it all settled into her bones at once. Her head tilted back, her eyes closed, and in the small, quiet room at the edge of Dry Creek, with the wind brushing against the boards and a stranger breathing steady on the bed, she stayed. Morning came slow, not with a rush of light, but with a thin gray line slipping through the cracks in the wall, stretching across the floor until it found the edge of the bed. Dust floated in that light, drifting like something without purpose. Clara woke in the chair. Her neck ached. Her hand was still resting near his arm, like she had meant to keep watch and forgot halfway through. For a second, she didn't move. Then she looked. He was still there, breathing steady, slower than before, but stronger. She let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The basin sat where she left it, water gone cloudy. The strip of cloth at his shoulder had darkened, but held. Clara stood and stretched the stiffness from her back. She crossed the room and poured what little fresh water she had left into a tin cup. The metal clicked softly against the basin. Behind her, the bed shifted. She turned. His eyes were open. Not wide, not startled, just aware. He didn't speak right away. He looked at the ceiling first, then the wall, then finally at her, like he was placing himself back into the world one piece at a time. "You're awake," Clara said. Her voice came out quieter than she expected. He gave a small nod. It cost him something, that movement. She could see it. "You should stay still," she added. "You tore something open." He let his eyes drop for a moment, as if checking his own body without moving it. "Figures," he said. His voice was still rough, but clearer now. Clara stepped closer and handed him the cup. "Drink." He took it, careful with his left hand. His right stayed near his side, close to where the knife rested. He noticed her glance. For a moment, his fingers tightened slightly around the handle beneath the blanket. Then he eased it. He drank slow. Not greedy. Just enough. "Where am I?" he asked. "Edge of town," she said. "Old boarding house. Doesn't belong to anyone now." He looked around again. Took in the bare walls, the single table, the worn floorboards. "You live here?" "Close enough." He nodded once. Silence settled in again. Clara moved back to the basin, wringing out a cloth and bringing it to his shoulder. "I need to look at that," she said. He didn't argue. She pulled the edge of the shirt aside, careful not to drag the fabric across the wound. The cloth she had tied the night before had soaked through in places. He didn't flinch when she touched it, but his jaw tightened. Just a little. "You said you fell," she said, not looking at him. "Off a horse." "That's right." She cleaned around the cut, slow and steady. "This doesn't look like a fall." He didn't answer. Clara dipped the cloth again, squeezing out the water. "Looks like something came at you, not the other way around." Still nothing. She tied a fresh strip, pulling it firm but not tight. You don't have to tell me, she said after a moment. Just don't lie about it. That got his attention. She felt it before she saw it. The shift in the air, small but real. When she looked up, his eyes were on her. Not defensive, not angry, measuring. I didn't mean to bring trouble to your door, he said. That wasn't my question. Another pause. He let out a breath through his nose, then looked past her toward the wall. I'm not the kind of man that stays put long, he said. That's all. Clara sat back slightly, resting her hands on her knees. I figured that much. He glanced at her again. You always take strangers in off the road? No, she said. Then why me? She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached for the cloth again, folding it slowly. You asked for bread, she said. Not much else. That enough reason? It was yesterday. He watched her for a moment longer. Something in his expression shifted. Not softer, just less guarded for a second. Then it was gone. Later that day, the town started talking. Clara heard it before she saw anyone. Voices drifting in through the open window. A wagon rolling by slower than usual. Someone stopping to speak low and close. Big ranch, north of the ridge. Man missing near a week now. Found his horse without a rider. She stepped outside just long enough to catch the rest. Name's Maddox. Wyatt Maddox. Runs half the land past Silver Ridge. Clara stood still. The name settled in her chest like something heavy. She turned back inside. He was sitting up now. Not fully. Propped against the wall, one hand braced behind him. The effort showed in the way his shoulders held. You shouldn't be up, she said. I've been down long enough. She set the basin aside and watched him a second. You ever hear your own name out on the street? She asked. His gaze sharpened. Depends who's saying it. Depends what they're saying too, I guess. He didn't move. Clara took a step closer. Wyatt Maddox, she said. The room went still. Not loud, not sudden, just quiet in a way that pressed in from all sides. His eyes didn't leave hers. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he looked down at his hands. I was hoping that wouldn't reach here so quick, he said. Clara let out a slow breath. So it's true. He didn't answer directly. I told you, he said instead. I'm not someone you should keep around. That wasn't your call to make, she replied. He lifted his head again. There was something different in his face now. Not the man who walked into the saloon. Not the one who lay half-conscious in the road. Something steadier. Something that had weight behind it. And now that you know? He asked. Clara held his gaze. The wind moved lightly outside, brushing along the boards, slipping through the cracks. I know you didn't fall off a horse, she said, and I know you didn't tell me who you were. He nodded once. That about covers it. She studied him a second longer. Then she turned away, picking up the empty cup from the table. I'm not throwing you back out there, she said. Not like this. Didn't ask you to. No, she said. You didn't ask for anything. That hung between them. Clara set the cup down and leaned one hand against the table. You just showed up, she added, and now half the territory's looking for you. Wyatt said nothing, but his eyes stayed on her. Not pushing, not pulling, just waiting. And for the first time since she had dragged him in from the road, Clara felt something shift inside her. Not fear, not exactly, but the sense that whatever she had taken in last night was bigger than the small room could hold. The wind came first, not strong, just a slow pull along the boards, like the land itself was drawing a breath. Clara noticed it when the loose shutter tapped once against the frame. Then again, a little harder. Wyatt had managed to stand by the time the sky began to change. He was near the door, one hand braced against the wall, testing his weight like a man who didn't trust the ground yet. His shirt hung open at the shoulder, where the fresh bandage showed through. "You're not ready," Clara said. "I won't be if I keep sitting," he answered. His voice was steadier now, not strong, but it carried something it hadn't before. Clara crossed the room and reached past him, pushing the door shut before the wind could push it open again. Outside, the light had turned strange, not dim, just muted, the kind of color that made everything look farther away than it was. "You see that?" she asked. Wyatt didn't need to look twice. "Storm." The word sat heavy. Dry Creek didn't get many. But when it did, they didn't come gentle. The wind picked up again, sharper this time. It dragged dust along the ground, lifting it in thin lines that curled and broke against the side of the house. Clara moved quick after that. She checked the latch on the back window, pulled the loose cloth tighter over the crack in the wall, took the basin and set it closer to the corner so it wouldn't tip. Wyatt watched her a moment. "You always this ready?" he asked. "Learn fast when you don't have anyone else to do it," she said. Another gust hit the door, harder. The wood shuddered under it. Wyatt stepped forward, slow but certain, and pressed his palm flat against the frame to hold it steady while she dropped the crossbar into place. Their hands came close, not touching, just near enough to feel the heat. Neither of them moved away right off. Then the wind rose. It came all at once like something breaking loose. Dust slammed against the walls in a long, dragging rush. The roof creaked. The lamp flickered hard enough that Clara reached out to steady it. The room dimmed to a warm, uneven glow. For a while they said nothing. There wasn't much to say over the sound of it. Clara moved to the table and poured what was left of the water into a cup. She handed it to him without looking directly. "Sit," she said. He did. Not because he had to, because he knew he should. The bed creaked under his weight. He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees, the cup resting between his hands. The storm pressed in around them. Dust scraped along the boards. Something outside banged loose, then settled. The kind of noise that made a person listen without meaning to. Clara came closer after a minute. "Let me check that again," she said, nodding toward his shoulder. He didn't argue. She stood beside him, close enough now that the lamp lit the line of his jaw, the edge of the bruise fading there. She peeled back the cloth, careful with her fingers. He drew a slow breath when the air touched it. "You push too hard. It'll open again," she said. "I've had worse," he replied. "That doesn't make this better." She worked in silence after that. The new strip of cloth was rougher than she would have liked, but it held. She tied it firm, then paused, her hands still for a second longer than needed. Wyatt didn't move. "You don't talk much," she said. "Neither do you." "That's different." He let out a faint breath that might have been a laugh. The storm hit the side of the house again, louder this time. The walls shivered under it. Clara's hand stayed where it was, resting lightly against his shoulder. "Why'd they come after you?" she asked. He didn't answer right away. The wind filled the space instead. Then, low enough that it almost got lost in the noise, he said, "Because I have something they want." "That land?" she asked. "That, and what comes with it." She nodded once, more to herself than to him. "And you ran." "I didn't get the chance to stand." She glanced at him then. His eyes were on the floor, but not unfocused, not distant, present, tired maybe, but not broken. "I didn't think you were the kind to run," she said. He looked up at that. For a moment, something passed between them. Not sharp, not sudden, just a recognition of something neither of them said out loud. "I'm not," he answered. The storm roared again. Clara's hand shifted, just slightly, brushing against the side of his neck before she pulled it back. It was small, but it stayed there between them. Wyatt watched her, not reaching, not closing the distance, just waiting. Clara stood still, her breath uneven in a way she didn't quite understand. The lamp flickered again. The room dimmed, then steadied. Outside, the storm swallowed the rest of the world. Inside, there was only the sound of it, and the space between them growing smaller with every quiet second. Wyatt lifted his hand slowly. Not fast. Not certain. He stopped just short of her face, like he was giving her time to step away. She didn't. His fingers brushed her cheek. Light. Careful. As if he wasn't sure she was real enough to touch. Clara closed her eyes for half a breath, then opened them again. She didn't move back. She didn't lean forward either. Just stayed. That was enough. Wyatt leaned in first. Slow. The kind of movement that could still be stopped. Their lips met like that. Careful. Uncertain. Not taking. Not claiming. Just finding. Clara's hand came up, gripping lightly at the fabric near his shoulder, steadying herself more than him. The storm raged on outside, but inside, the noise faded to something distant. When they pulled apart, it wasn't sudden, just a breath. Just enough space to see each other again. Neither of them spoke. There wasn't anything to say that wouldn't break it. The storm held through the night, and somewhere between the wind and the quiet, sleep found them both, not far from where they had been. Morning came different, clearer. The sky washed clean. Clara woke first. The room felt smaller again, the light sharper. Wyatt was already sitting up, not leaning, not bracing, just there. The sound came before she could speak. Hoofbeats, more than one, fast. They cut through the quiet morning air, sharp against the ground. Clara stood. Wyatt didn't move. The horses came into view through the thin crack of the window. 6 riders, dust trailing behind them, clothes clean, saddles fitted well. They stopped in front of the house. One man swung down first. He didn't hesitate. "Mr. Maddox," he called. The name landed hard in the small room. Clara didn't look at Wyatt right away. She didn't need to. The silence beside her had already changed. When she turned, he was on his feet. Straight. The weight he carried before was still there. But now it sat differently. Not dragging him down, holding him up. His eyes met hers once. Not asking, not explaining, just steady. Clara felt the distance then. Not across the room, something larger, something she hadn't seen clearly until that moment. Outside, the man called again. "Sir, we've been looking everywhere." Wyatt stepped toward the door. Clara didn't stop him. She didn't move at all. The latch lifted. The door opened. Light poured in, sharp and clean, and with it, the world he belonged to. The men outside didn't wait. One stepped forward, hat already in his hand. "Sir, we thought—" He stopped when he saw the bandage, the torn shirt beneath it. His jaw tightened, not in shock, but in something closer to relief held too tight. "You took your time," Wyatt said. His voice had changed. Not louder, not colder, just certain. The man nodded once. "We tracked the horse, lost the trail past the ridge, figured you headed south." Wyatt glanced past him, at the other riders. Clean coats, good leather. The kind of men who didn't spend nights sleeping under open sky unless they chose to. "I'm fine," he said. The man's eyes flicked toward the house, toward the open door, toward Clara standing just inside, not moving. "And her?" he asked quietly. Wyatt didn't answer right away. Clara felt it before she saw it. That moment where he chose what to say, what not to say. "She helped me," he said finally. The man nodded again. Respectful this time. "Yes, sir." "Sir." The word settled in the air like something solid. Clara turned away before she could feel it land. She moved back into the room, picking up the cup from the table, though it didn't need picking up, setting it down again a second later. Behind her, boots crossed the threshold. Wyatt stepped inside once more. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The room felt smaller now, not because it had changed, because something had been named. "They'll take you back," Clara said. He didn't answer. "They've been looking," she added. "Whole territory, sounds like." "I didn't ask them to." "No," she said. "You didn't ask for much of anything." That wasn't sharp, just true. Wyatt took another step in, slower this time. "I wasn't lying to you," he said. Clara let out a small breath, almost a laugh, but not quite. "You just weren't telling the whole of it." He held her gaze. "Would it have changed anything?" She didn't answer right away. Her eyes dropped to the floor, to the line of dust near the door where the wind had pushed it in. "Yes," she said after a moment. "It would have changed how I listened." Wyatt's jaw shifted. "That's fair." Another silence. Outside, one of the horses stamped against the ground. Leather creaked. A low murmur between the men, then quiet again. Clara folded her arms, not tight, just enough to hold them still. "You should go," she said. "I will." But he didn't move. Clara looked at him then, really looked. The man from the saloon was still there, somewhere under the clean line of his posture, the steadiness in his eyes. The man who had sat by the window and eaten slow, like the meal mattered. But there was something else now, something larger, and she could see it clearly. "You don't belong here," she said. Wyatt frowned slightly. "I was here." "For a night," she replied. "Not for a life." The words didn't come easy, but they came steady. He took a breath, like he was about to answer that, then stopped. Clara stepped back once, just enough to make space. "That's not a place I can follow," she added. He looked at her, searching for something in her face. Not anger, not regret. Just distance. The kind that didn't come from miles. "You think that's all I am?" he asked quietly. "I think it's part of you," she said. "And it's a part that changes things." Wyatt nodded once, slow, like he understood more than he wanted to. Outside, the man called again. "Sir?" Wyatt's eyes stayed on Clara, for a second longer than needed. Then he turned. He walked out into the light without looking back. The door stayed open behind him. Clara didn't move to close it. She stood where she was, hands at her sides, listening to the sounds that followed. Boot in stirrup, leather pulling tight. A quiet command. The horses moved. Hooves struck the road, then faded, taking the dust with them. It didn't take long. Dry Creek swallowed the sound the way it swallowed most things. Clara stepped forward then and closed the door. The latch fell into place with a small, final click. The room went still again. She looked at the bed, at the place where he had sat, at the cup he hadn't finished. Then she turned and reached for her shawl. By midday, she was back at the saloon. Nothing had changed. The same tables, the same worn counter, the same smell of old coffee and dust. Gus stood behind the bar, watching her come in. "I hear you had company," he said. Clara tied her apron without answering. "Important kind," he added. "Didn't think you ran in those circles?" "I don't," she said. The men at the table looked up, not laughing this time, just watching. Clara picked up a glass and started wiping it down. Her hands didn't shake, but they didn't quite feel like hers either. Later, when the door opened again, the whole room noticed. Not because of the sound, because of what followed it. Boots, clean and steady. A coat that hadn't seen dust in days. A presence that carried weight without asking for it. Wyatt Maddox stepped inside. No hesitation, no stagger. The room went quiet in a way it hadn't before. Gus straightened. The men at the table shifted in their seats. No one laughed. Wyatt didn't look at any of them. He walked straight to the counter. To her. Clara set the glass down. Slow. Her eyes met his. Not soft. Not hard. Just there. "I came back," he said. The words were simple. They carried more than they needed to. Clara held his gaze. "You said you would go," she replied. "I did." "And now?" He reached into his coat. Not fast. Not careful either. Just steady. He set a small wooden box on the counter between them. The kind that didn't look like much from the outside. Clara didn't touch it. "What's that?" she asked. Wyatt rested his hand beside it. "A choice," he said. The room stayed silent. No one moved. Clara looked at the box, then back at him. "You already have everything," she said. He shook his head once. "Not everything." She let out a slow breath. Her eyes dropped to the wood, to the grain running along its edge. Then she asked, quiet enough that only he could hear, "If you had nothing, would you still come back?" Wyatt didn't look away. "I came back when I had everything," he said. "That's not what I asked." A pause. Then softer. "I would have come back anyway." Clara's fingers hovered near the edge of the box. Not touching. Not pulling away. Just there. Outside, the wind moved again. Light this time. Inside, the whole room seemed to hold still. And for a moment, it felt like everything waited on what she would do next. If you had been standing there, in that quiet room with the dust still settling in the air, what would you have chosen? To step forward into something uncertain, or stay where everything made sense, even if it felt smaller than your heart could hold? Clara didn't move because of the ring, not because of the man standing in front of her, carrying land, power, and a name that could open doors she had never even seen. She moved because she remembered a different man, the one who sat by a window, eating slow, the one who didn't ask for more than a piece of bread, the one who looked at her like she mattered, long before he had anything to offer in return. That's the part that stayed. Sometimes love doesn't arrive as something grand. It comes quiet, worn down, almost gone. And it asks nothing except to be seen. And sometimes, the hardest thing isn't giving someone a chance. It's believing you deserve one too. So tell me, have you ever let someone walk away because you thought their world was too big for yours? Or have you ever turned back, hoping they'd still be there? There are more stories like this waiting. Stories about people who found something real in places no one thought to look. If this one stayed with you, you might want to stay a little longer too.